So we've come to the end of our journey in the desert. We've come to the beginning of Holy Week. And Holy Week is, of course, the manifestation of the glory of God. It's where the Son is revealed in his splendor towards the Father, and the Father is revealed in all of his love towards his Son. It's the Trinitarian revelation of the gift of the Spirit from the Son as he commends himself into the hands of the Father, and Our Lady is there. I mean, this is the Christian moment. And yet it's also where evil manifests itself in the most powerful of ways. A disciple betrays the master unto death. This is no small betrayal. He betrays him unto death for the love of money. Where you have the prince of the apostles denying the king, the vicar who's been named to be the vicar of Christ on earth, denies the king in whose power he stands, thus denying himself. Peter, if Jesus Christ is not crucified, you have no power on earth. There's all kinds of treachery involved. The lying of the high priest, the lying of the Pharisees, the force of the guards who put Christ in prison, bound, striking him on the face, the mockery of Herod, the full unleashing and revelation of evil in this world is poured out upon Jesus this week. The King of Kings and the Prince of Peace is made to be dressed in a purple garment in mockery, crowned with thorns, struck on the head, spat in the face, and given a cross to carry like a criminal until he's crucified upon it and hangs in death, his shadow over the whole sinful world. And this moment, this week, is, of course, emblematic for our journey in faith in the desert, in that the longer we stay in the desert, the more that we realize the cutting razor line edge between life and death, good and evil. And the more that we become weary, like the people of Israel. I'm looking today at Numbers chapter 26, when the people of Israel fall to the bowels of Peor. It's actually chapter 25. And in this chapter, they're right on the edge of the promised land. After 40 years in the desert and experiencing all that they've experienced, they get to the edge of the promised land, ready to cross, and they fall into idolatry again, worshiping this pagan gods called the Baals. And the Baals of Peor, they're seduced into by the wiles of women who seduce the sons of Israel into sexual immorality as an act of worship towards the Baals of Peor. This is like a complete disaster right at the end, where evil, so to speak, waits until the end and then strikes. There's an old Latin expression that speaking about the scorpion, it says, the venom is in the tail. Meaning the way that evil will oftentimes manifest itself is at the very last moment. After Jesus had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights and he was hungry, then the devil appeared. After Israel had gone through the entire desert, was about to go through the promised land, that's when the Baals of Peor arrived. Through, of course, the most seductive of all means, the wiles of the woman, and you know, the treachery of the men. It's just such a base, sad way to fall, and they fall at the last moment in that way. And that can be very disheartening for us. There's a lot of reasons we could lose heart in our life. You feel like the evil's never going to give up. You feel like the evil is stronger than us. I mean, the seduction that these women had upon these men must have been absolutely mesmerizing. Here's what we read, right? It says, while Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was enkindled against Israel. Right? And so there's that. It's just there it is. They're living there and suddenly they fell. And you could just say, there's no way to resist that type of thing. Who could stand after a long journey to be that resilient in the face of temptation? And I can understand that. And we can look at our country right now. You can look at our church right now. You can look at your family. You can look at our culture in general and just say, it seems like we're at the end. And this is where evil can triumph. But something amazing happens with that temptation. It's not the end of the road. In fact, a whole generation of judges, a whole group of judges rises to the occasion and defends the truth about God, punishing those who were guilty of that idolatry and committing themselves to the purity of the worship of God. That's an amazing thought, that as the evil comes, good is made manifest. Right? And this isn't the only time. I'm thinking of Phineas, for example, as he finishes off, right, that punishment in a very clear-cut way to those. Well, Phineas was able to show heroic action because the people were falling away. And this was the same time at the golden calf, when they worshiped the golden calf back in Exodus, at that manifestation of a great fall. There was the rise of the Levites, who went and did their commandment of punishment that Moses asked them to do. And there's an increase in fidelity at the moment when everyone else is falling away. When darkness falls, the light shines the more brightly. It's true that darkness is everywhere and you could want to curse it. But it is better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. And when the dark is present, the light shines more brightly. When people fall away in discouragement, instead of you becoming discouraged, our Lord says, lift up your head. Your redemption is at hand. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. People will die of fright. There's horrible things that will afflict the earth. Great signs will appear in the heaven. But as for you, lift up your head. Your redemption is close at hand. In other words, there's a lesson here from the desert. And on the one hand, you want to lament the fact that you're in the desert. You want to lament the fact it's a place of disease. You had the plague that broke out in front of all these people, and 24,000 Israelites were killed. Not exactly a happy day. You got snakes that are attacking them elsewhere. You've got foreign armies attacking. Everyone's attacking you in the desert. And the desert's a place of combat because it's a place where the resources are scarce and every form of life is seeking to survive, including our own. And so if you want to survive, you have to fend off your foe, and you have to be intelligent about how you garner resources. This is, well, a lot of us, no one wants to live that way. We'd rather live in the promised land of Gilead, where land flowing with milk and honey, right? Where we were gathering wheat into the barns and taking care of multiple sheep and living a happy farm life, right? We all want the Shire. None of us wants to go to Mordor. And yet the fact is, if the people in the Shire don't react when Mordor spreads its darkness throughout the land, then there will be no more Shire. The simple fact in the desert is that if Israel doesn't defend itself, it will be wiped out. And that if you don't stand for the purity of worship, your God, you will lose the heart of the people and be incapable of taking possession of the promised land. There's so many allegories here that say that this harshness of the desert has this for an advantage and this for a message of hope for us, is that it allows us to summon the deepest parts of our excellence. It allows us to hone the greatest skills of our soul. It allows us to bring out and make shine the best inside of us. Why should I allow the fact that so many around me fail to discourage my own determination to succeed? Why would I allow the fact that so many are betraying to make waver for a moment my own constancy of dedication? On the contrary, I think that it's the time to deploy your strength for the help of everyone around you. Those who are falling need leadership. Those who are staggering need encouragement. I think many of us wish that we weren't alone in the desert like Israel. I'm sure Israel would have wished that it wasn't alone in the desert either. But God allowed Israel to go in the desert, as he allows you and I to be in the desert, so that we can bring his light there, and that we can bring all the weary and tired souls who otherwise would be abandoned to the forces of despair and the influence of darkness into the light to which they belong. God needs heroes these days, mighty warriors like he asked Israel to be a warrior then, and to not be discouraged by the fact that we are alone or by the fact that there is struggle, but rather alone, let us struggle. For the Lord, in fact, fights with us. And that fight is not against the foe. It's for the salvation of all. A salvation for which Jesus Christ shed his blood. And so as we're in Holy Week and we see our Lord himself go alone to the cross with his mother, supported by his mother, supported by St. John, St. Mary Magdalene, Mary the wife of Clopas, the few, and yet alone at the same time, to carry the whole weight of this world's sin. So let us at the same time not be afraid of the manifestations of the darkness that come when we're in this place of struggle. Remember this, maybe the darkness is afraid of you. Maybe the foes that are out there, of which you are so terrified and so easily discouraged, would actually flee if, as St. Peter tells us, we were to resist the devil. St. Peter says, resist the devil and he will flee. And this is, in fact, I think, what we're called to do. Ride out and meet those who would destroy us head on. For the Lord is with us. And his message of peace and his message of salvation is for all through us.